Hey there, and thanks for stopping by to check out my video. Now this is one that's been on my to-do list pretty much all year, and I'm excited to finally be able to bring it to you. And that's around the concept of the KL box, or known length box reticle, and the Arken EP8 1:8 LPVO. Now earlier this year, Arken launched the EP8 1:8 LPVO, and it really took the industry kind of by storm. This is a high-performing LPVO at an unbelievable price point, sub $500. It's packed with some pretty premium features, such as 8 power, which is at the upper end of what you'd see in an LPVO. And in my experience, from my initial impressions and kind of light torture test review video that I put back in January or February time frame, it holds up well. It's a durable optic, it held zero, and it performs well. But I remember back when this launched, and even in the comments and messages I've received around my experience with this optic, many of you have questions around that known length or KL box reticle. It seems cluttered, it seems confusing. Does it actually work, and is it a value? Many of you have said you'd like to see maybe a more traditional style reticle, but I tell you what, in my time using this optic, I've actually realized this is actually a pretty cool reticle that is very useful. And what I intend to do in this video is show you the concept of the KL box reticle, how it works, and how we can use it to make impacts out to distance. So really quick, if you're not familiar with the KL box reticle, what it is, it's got a center dot that's designed to be zeroed at 50 or 200 yards. And then down below that, it has hold points for 400, 500, 600, 700, 800 yards. And around those dots, or those holding points for those distances, that BDC, is a rectangle. So there's a horizontal and a vertical bar that are calibrated to an 18-inch wide by 28-inch tall torso. Now the purpose of this reticle is to allow you to frame a torso in width and length, estimate distance, and then hold in the reticle to make an impact using the BDC calibration. Now this reticle is calibrated for 5.56 77 grain ammunition, or you can also shoot the 175 SMK out of a 308. Now in this video, I'm going to be running only the 5.56 because in my experience, it works really well for that. So I want to make sure we've got a great viewing experience for you to see how this reticle is designed and how it works out to distance. So the concept here is simple: quick and easy rough range estimation, and then a hold to put impacts on that target downrange quickly and easily. So in this video, I'm going to show you exactly how it all works. We're going to move into the zeroing process. I'm going to show you the 50-yard zero I have on the rifle, and then how to calibrate the performance of that reticle using the data at the 50-yard line for velocity and BC to true that reticle up out to 800 yards, which is the max distance. Then I'm going to go out to the 800-yard line and make sure that my drop at 800 yards is in line with what the BDC calls for. Make sure there's no correction needed there. And then after that, we're going to move up to some unknown distance shooting. So at that point, once I'm trued out to 800 yards, I'm going to move up and shoot that 18 by 30-inch torso at unknown distance. And all I'm going to do is use the reticle to range that target, hold, and make my impacts. What I intend to do in this video is show you how quick and easy it is to use a reticle like this to engage unknown distance targets such as a full-size torso. So when you think about where this optic makes sense, this is a combat accuracy type optic. This is not a precision optic. We're not zooming into 20 power to shoot sub-MOA targets. This thing is meant for full-size torsos quickly and easily, and that's what I'm doing in this video. So if you like the sounds of that, stick around. Let me know, are you running an EP8 1:8? And if so, what's your experience been with the KL box reticle? I'd love to hear from you. If you haven't used it, let me know your thoughts or what you've heard, or if you might find value in a reticle like this. So from here, let's move into a quick gear review. We'll talk about what I'm going to run is a rifle setup and ammo, and then we'll start shooting. So for a rifle setup, this is a pretty cool rifle. I put this thing together earlier this year. I actually just got a new lower for it. So the lower we're going to be running, I just got this from Griffin Armament. They're a long-time supporter of the channel. This is their Mark II lower. I found myself needing a new 5.56 lower, so I hit up Griffin to get one of their Mark IIs. I love the ambi bolt release on this lower. It is so simple to release, and also you can lock it back by pushing up. So I like that. I also like the integrated trigger guard here on these lowers. So Griffin Mark II lower, got their buffer tube on it, and then this is the Magpul. I believe they call this the PRDT. So this is the new PR type MOE stock with a dual tensioning mechanism. It's actually quite tight. I like it for precision shooting, so like this stock. For a trigger, I'm running the Core trigger from Ballistic Engineering. They've been a long-time supporter of my channel. I had that trigger dropped in this lower. It's crisp, it's clean, makes it easy for precision shooting, and very short reset if we want to shoot fast. So that's the lower we're running. The upper, got to give a shout out to a couple of companies here that will help me out. So the actual upper charging handle and bolt carrier group are from Aero. The barrel is a 16-inch Ballistic Advantage Hanson profile 5.56 barrel. I believe it's 1-in-7 twist. That was sent out by Aero and Ballistic Advantage. And then the handguard, this thing is really cool. So this is actually the Black Label handguard. And the cool thing about this handguard I actually like is the integrated bipod. So this bipod, it flips down, as you can see. It's really kind of quick and simple and very clean. To fold it up, you just pull out of the leg, swings back up and out of the way. And as you can see, I actually have an Arken plate on it. So you can actually run an Arken plate on the handguard to still be able to use that integrated bipod. Really slick setup. And then for a suppressor, we're going to be running the Griffin Armament HRT 30 caliber suppressor. Again, Griffin has been a longtime supporter. They did provide the suppressor for me to use on the channel, so appreciate the support of each of the companies here. Their support is what allows me to keep creating content like this. Certainly the focus of the video will be the Arken EP8 1-8 LPVO, and this is in an Arken mount. And again, Arken did send this out. I appreciate their support. If you find yourself interested in Arken products, do yourself a favor and use my code MULLETS, as that will allow you to get the best deal possible on any Arken product on their website. Also, it gives me a little bit of help to keep creating content like this. So each of you that might find yourself in the market for Arken products, again, do yourself a favor, do me a favor, help me grow this channel. I appreciate the support from each of you that are using my code to make your purchases. So Arken provided this optic, but again, what I'm going to show in this video is just going to be downrange performance. I don't feel like there's any bias here. I'm going to show all the footage from when I shoot so that you can see the impacts, you can see through the optic to get an idea of how this thing works and my experience running it. So ammo wise, again, I mentioned this optic is calibrated for 5.56 pressure, 77 grain SMK. So for ammo, I'm going to be running the IMI Razor Core 5.56 Mark 262 load. This is going to run a 77 grain Sierra Match King. Shout out to Sierra for their support on my channel. Again, they're a longtime supporter. But this is going to be 5.56 pressure, 77 grain SMK Mark 262 clone ammo. And I think what you're going to find is this ammo is calibrated almost perfectly to the reticle in the EP8, and you're going to see me make impacts out to some pretty neat distances with this ammo and this setup. So from here, if you like the sounds of it, we're going to move down to the 50-yard line. Let's take a look at the zeroing process, and then we'll start shooting steel out at distance. The first thing we have to do is make sure we're properly zeroed, and then run some numbers through our ballistic calculator to make sure our downrange performance is in line with what the reticle is calling for. Very simple process. So you can see this morning out of the gate, I fired a handful of rounds just to make sure I'm in the ballpark, and I was. Then I fired 5 rounds here on camera to give you a look at how the rifle's performing. I'm guessing that's about 3/4 of an inch or 1.5 MOA. So acceptable accuracy for what this rifle is. I'm happy with how it's shooting. Out of the FX True Ballistic Chronograph, I got an average speed of 2660 feet per second across these 5 rounds, and a G7BC of 0.193, which I believe is in the ballpark for a 77 grain SMK. I then plug that data into my shooter ballistic calculator, and I'm going to roll out to 800 yards. I'm going to take a look at the number that my scope is calling for, my setup is calling for to get to 800 yards. That's 26.6 MOA. Now if I go into the manual for the EP8, they're going to call out a truing process that I can use to make sure I'm good to go out to 800 yards. Now remember, my number for my setup is 26.6 MOA. If you look in the manual for the EP8, they're calling for 26.1 to 26.2 MOA to get out to 800 yards. So I have a gap of roughly 0.5 minutes where my bullet is going to be dropping roughly a half MOA more than the reticle is calling for from Arken. That could be the result of velocity, BC, hard to say, but a slight gap there. To correct that, it's very simple. My bullet is falling 0.5 MOA more than the reticle is calling for, so all I'm going to do is dial up 0.5 minutes right now, take that correction before we even go out to distance, and then I'm going to move out to 800 yards. I'll put some rounds on the target at 800 yards. But what I want to do there is make sure the 800-yard mark in the reticle matches what the bullet is actually doing at 800 yards. At that point, I know I'm trued up, and then we can start shooting some unknown distance. So let's move back to the 800-yard line, put some rounds on steel, and see how true we are. Here we are back at the 800-yard line. I think we're actually about 802. What I want to do now is just check to make sure that my reticle is true out to distance. So remember, at the 50-yard line, I dialed up 2 clicks or 0.5 MOA based on the calculations called out in the EP8 manual. Now, at the 800-yard line, I'm going to use the 800-yard dot. We'll put rounds down there and see where they land. In theory, the elevation that I get out of the bullets downrange should match the reticle almost perfect. It's almost dead calm out here right now. Maybe a slight left to right, so I'm just going to favor left edge of plate. But let's see where we're at. Actually, first up, let's just take a look at the ranging capability. So you can see my full-size dipstick down there. I'm in the 800-yard box. So let's just look at the width. Right now, you can see the width of that reticle is just about perfect. So pretty cool. Let's do height. That plate is 30 inches tall versus the reticle's calibrated for 28. And as you can see, it's almost spot on. So that'll be kind of fun later to shoot some unknown distance. For now, let's just see where our bullets land. So I'm going to hold 800-yard elevation, left edge of plate. Well, the bullet went right where I was aimed. On the plate. Impact. Second round impact. Okay, so just off the right. Off the right, I believe. Impact. 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 Off the right. The left. Impact. I don't know why these old 20 round PMags don't lock back, but as you can see, that was a handful of impacts out there at 800 yards using the 800-yard hash mark in the reticle. I'm going to run down, take a close-up look at the target, but based on what I'm seeing here, I would say elevation-wise, we are good enough to start shooting some unknown distance. I tell you what, I'm impressed with the results I saw there at the 800-yard target when I ran down after we trued up the BDC. Pretty impressive. It looked like I had about 5 rounds stacked maybe in a 6 to 8 inch circle. Elevation-wise, looked really good. I believe the misses that I saw on the plate were likely windage. So ultimately, a 50% hit ratio with a 16-inch 5.56 at 800 yards with an 8 power optic, I'm impressed with. And the good news is, it does appear to BDC is trued up, so our 50-yard zero plus that 0.5 MOA, as called out in the EP8 manual, seems to work. I haven't made any changes based on what I saw there at 800 yards. Now the fun part. We don't have the rangefinder. All we're going to do now is use the reticle, that full-size IPSC, which again is 18 inches wide, 30 inches tall. We're going to check maybe combat accuracy or combat functionality of this known length reticle in the EP8. So first up, I grabbed the four-wheeler, and my plan is I've moved downrange. I'm much closer to my target. We're just going to start shooting it. We're going to use the reticle to try to range it and see how quickly and accurately we can make impact. So here I am. I think I'm in the ballpark of 200, maybe to 250 yards. And let's just use the reticle and figure out what we're seeing. So, maybe this is something quick. There you can see the target. That's 8 power. Now, if I go to the 400-yard hash, you can see the target is way bigger than the 400-yard box. So we're much closer than 400. I'm going to zoom out. Now, the cool thing, remember this reticle, we did a 50-yard zero, which is also a 200-ish yard zero. So 50, 200, meaning from about muzzle to about 250 yards, we can hold center of target, and our impacts will be plus or minus a couple of inches. So based on what I'm seeing, we're much closer than 400 yards. I'm just going to hold center and see where we're at. Oh, dead center. There we are, no problem. Those seem to be pretty centered up. I'm guessing we're maybe in the ballpark of 200-ish yards. Let's push back, keep making some impacts. I move back a bit further, so let's see where we're at. You can see, let's zoom back in, let's go to 8 power. Now if I go to the 400-yard mark, Plate's a little bit wider than 400. Yeah, we're much closer than 400. So with that 50, 200 yard zero, I'm just going to go kind of up there in the neck. Back. Yeah, it looks like we're impacting down there in the stomach. So we're between, say, 200 and 400 yards, but basically I'm just holding high chest. No problem making those hits. Let's keep pushing further. I've moved back again. How about we try some rounds off of the tripod? It's worth noting, when I zeroed at the 50-yard line, I went ahead and also checked my zero off of the tripod to make sure there was no shift. I didn't see anything. As you can see, the 5 rounds I fired off of the tripod looked to be very much centered up after I had made that 0.5 MOA up adjustment. So we're not going to make any point of impact shift adjustments for the tripod, as I believe it's zeroed. So with that, let's see where we're at. Let's see what the reticle looks like. So as far as width, I actually think we're right in the ballpark of 400 yards. That's what the length looks like. We might be a smidge closer than 400, but I'm just going to go 400. Back. So you'll have to let me know in the comments where those impacts are landing. I can see them bunching up on the plate, but as you can see, we ranged that and impacted it. Let's keep pushing further. How about we use a little natural terrain for our next position? So again, I've pushed back further. Same target setup out there. Let's figure out where we're at. Let's try the 500 yard. So 500 yard, you can see the plate is narrower than the width of the box. It's also shorter, meaning it's further. Let's try 600 yards. So 600 yards looks close. I'm betting we're just beyond 600 yards, so let's just use that 600 hash. See where we're at. We've got a little bit of wind. I'll just hold dead on with the first round. Impact. Back. Ooh, off the right. The right. Back. The right. Back. We didn't lock back, but as you can see, we must be in the ballpark of about 600 yards. No problem making those impacts, spotting our shots. Let's push out, try another distance. I've got one more unknown distance position that I can shoot, so I've moved back to it. Now, if you're like me, you're curious how far that last natural terrain position was. I grabbed the rangefinder, it was 640 yards. So we were just beyond 600 yards, as I kind of guessed based on the distance I was getting out of the reticle. Still pretty cool though, because that 600 yard mark allowed me to make those impacts out there really with no problem. Now this position I know is inside of 800 yards, as that's behind me here a little ways. So I should still be able to use the reticle to measure that target, see kind of where we're at. So I know I'm beyond 600. Ooh man, that mirage is bad. So 600 yards, you can see the line is much wider than the plate. Let's try 700. 700. Ooh, same. I'm feeling like we are. Let's try height. Yeah. The plate is definitely smaller than the line in width and height. Let's try 800. Now, I know I'm inside of 800, but let's see. Okay, so width, the plate I feel like is slightly wider. Ooh, that's tough. Let's try. I'm going to put the 700 yard dot in the head. Let's just see where we're at. Okay, that looked like it was low and right. So I'm going to come up and put the bottom of that vertical line in the plate. Let's see what happens. Low again. Here we go. Impact. Left edge. Left edge. Back. 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 Left edge. And we're empty. So, really quick, let me grab the rangefinder. Let's figure out how far we are. 745 yards. It's pretty cool. We're right at 750 yards, which is kind of between the 7 and 8, which is where I measured it. And that's kind of roughly where I was holding. I mean, we basically had that plate between the 7 and 8. Took me a couple of rounds to get there, but certainly as I did more of this and got to know my rifle and the optic better, make that a little bit easier. But as you can see, we made the impacts. Let me know what you think down in the comments. Let's go ahead and wrap up. Well, there you have it. An in-depth look of how the Arken EP8 KL, or known length box reticle, performs from the 50-yard zero all the way out to 800 yards. Now, you've got to let me know in the comments down below, what did you think about the performance of this reticle out to distance? Do you feel like it did allow me to quickly and accurately range targets and then rapidly put rounds on them? Let me know in the comments down below. I'd love to chat with you about what you saw. Now, while you're doing that, let's chat about my experience running the EP8 with the KL box reticle out to distance. Now, out of the gate, you saw me move down to the 50-yard line where we got the optic zero. 50 yards was no problem. Then we worked through the calibration process called out in the Arken manual. It was really simple. I took the information out of my FX True Ballistic chronograph, an average speed of 2660 and a G7 BC calculated at 0.193, plugged that into my shooter app, rolled out to 800 yards, and saw that the data for this rifle with this ammo called for 26.6 MOA of elevation to make an 800-yard shot. Compared that to what was in the manual for the EP8, Arken was calling for 26.1, so I had 0.5 MOA more drop in my bullet than the reticle was calibrated for. That means I had to adjust up 0.5 MOA there at the 50-yard line to calibrate this reticle for an 800-yard shot. Then we moved out to 800 yards, check that. And what you saw at 800 yards, I felt like was impressive performance. I believe we had 50% hits. We went 5 for 10 on a full-size dipstick. Now for reference, I'll throw a picture of myself next to the plate up. That plate is 18 inches wide by 30 inches tall. Now I'm a smaller guy, but 18 by 30 is what's agreed upon by the industry as the size of an average adult torso. And that's what a reticle like this, or maybe even like an ACOG, is calibrated to quickly and accurately range. Now, at 800 yards, we saw those 5 rounds stack into a pretty tight group, actually. Accuracy was really good. I had some windage misses, but the 5 impacts that were on the plate, to me, elevation looked good. I made no changes after seeing the performance there at the 800-yard line. I felt like the BDC was trued up and performing as it should. Then we moved down, I got on the four-wheeler, and we just started shooting that torso at unknown distance. What you saw was pretty impressive performance. Those first rounds, I moved up. I believe I was in the range of 200 to 250 yards. Remember, you saw me range it with the 400-yard width, and the plate was way bigger. So I knew I was way closer. I actually found that the plate width was about the same size as the center horseshoe in the EP8. I estimated my range to be 200 to 250. So remember that 50-yard zero is also a 200-yard zero with a 77 grain 5.56 load. So basically all I did was hold center on the plate. That's a lot. That's a generous target. Put my impacts out there fast. You could quickly put impacts on that plate. I estimate 200 to 250 yards, no problem. And then from there, I just started driving back on the four-wheeler and we started engaging the target. And in my experience, the ranging function, now again, that's a static target. It's not moving. So like if you were shooting an actual torso, there would be movement there. You know, maybe there would be twisting. So It might be hard to get a true 18-inch spread across the shoulders, but I had that. It really worked well. So basically with that KL box, all I had to do was frame the target, put the width and the height on the target, and get an idea of where I was at. The other cool thing about that is when I was ranging, I was already putting the rifle elevation-wise where it needed to be for a shot at that distance. So while ranging, I felt like was pretty quick and easy when there wasn't a ton of mirage. I was already there for my firing solution, so it was very fast. So I could range, get in the ballpark, and then put rounds quickly. We saw that happen in the ballpark of about 400 yards. Then we moved back here off this natural position, which turned out to be about 640 yards. Remember when I was shooting here, I ranged that in the reticle, I guessed, just past 600 yards, so 640. But see, the cool thing was, where that target, 30 inches tall, again, that's pretty generous, but we're shooting in a torso. Even though I misranged it by a little bit, I was in the ballpark enough to make my impact. So while I ranged it just beyond 600, the 600-yard dot allowed me to make plenty of impacts. Now with a 1 to 8 on 8 power, if you get mirage, it does get difficult to start spotting your impacts. Now keep in mind, when I'm shooting out here, these are ideal conditions for this setup. That 5.56 doesn't move a lot of material downrange. It's hard to spot impacts. But out here, a fire came through, it's extremely dry. I can see dust really well. If you're in conditions where it's wet, muddy, if there's vegetation, it's going to be really hard to spot the impacts out of a 5.56 as you start to get 600 yards and beyond. And actually, that's why I quit shooting 5.56 out to distances beyond 600 yards. I did that long ago. I felt like the 5.56, it can do it, and you saw it done here, but there's just not a lot of feedback on the plate or for your misses. It makes it difficult. But in these conditions where I'm shooting, I was able to spot my impacts. So at 640 yards, I could see some windage errors. Then I moved out to what turned out to be 750 yards. 750, I was prone. There was a lot of mirage. Conditions became a little bit more difficult. I ranged that target. I could tell it was further than 700 yards based on the size of the plate, and I knew it was closer than 800 yards. I was in front of the 800-yard line. But I could also tell that in the reticle. Now what you saw at that distance, it's quite the spread from the 700-yard hold to the 800-yard hold. There was a lot of drop there, so my initial rounds were landing low because I just held maybe wrong. I didn't gauge my distance well enough. But ultimately, I was able to spot my impacts, even on 8 power, and then correct and get on the plate. And ultimately, we made a lot of hits. So I believe there at the end, I was holding between the 7 and 800-yard hash. And I did have a frame of reference using the vertical line there from the KL box off of the 700 yards. So while I was holding in space a little bit, there was the ability to repeatedly hold the same spot so I can make those impacts. Now, this is one area, maybe we could debate this in the comments. I'd like to see this reticle have some more reference dots in it. I don't want to get cluttered, maybe something every maybe like 5 minutes or 2.5 minutes. Not necessarily tied to the BDC or wind speed or anything, just some more dots in it that would allow you to hold so you're not just out in space. I'm used to precision optics, trimmer 3s. There's a lot of material there that you can use for reference. I don't want to clutter it up because I like how clean and crisp it is. And the looks of this reticle has created a lot of conversations. Many of you think it's very different, maybe it's confusing. I actually like it. Once you start using it, it works well for what it's intended to do. I like how clean it is. Personally, I might like to see a handful more dots in there just to give me a frame of reference as I start holding. There are some wind dots in there to the left and right. I believe that's 10-mile-an-hour calibrations. Those are nice, but or it might be 7-mile-an-hour for 5.56. I can't remember, but there are windage dots there. So there are reference points. I'd personally just like to see more. I know when you zoom out and you go down to 1x, all of that disappears. You have a red dot to allow you to quickly and rapidly shoot up close. There's that big circle that comes into view. So close up, the KL box goes away. Then when you zoom in, you're getting more useful information there in that reticle. So it's very usable as it is. Just something I'd like to see might be a couple of more reference points. So ultimately, I feel like this reticle did allow me to quickly and accurately range targets well enough that I could then rapidly put rounds on it and make hits very effectively. Now keep in mind today, not a lot of wind. If there was wind, it'd be more difficult as I'd be holding more in space. But if you can spot your impacts, you're ranging, you're going to be in the ballpark. This reticle is also designed to range a head, which is 9 inches. That's from the dot in the KL box up to the top horizontal line. I didn't have a target that was 9 inches to be able to do that, but that is another way that you can range if you only have maybe part of a target exposed. Here, I was just showing off shooting a full-size torso. So ultimately, I like the reticle. It does take some getting used to. It does look very different. It can be confusing at first, but if you allow yourself to spend time and understand how it works, it is very effective. So, if you enjoyed this video, I'd like to ask you to help me grow this channel. It's very simple. One way you can do that, if you've watched this video and you found yourself interested in making a purchase of an Arken product, do yourself a favor and use my code MULLETS. That's going to allow you to make a purchase of an Arken product, the best deal possible, on their website at the time of your purchase. Again, it's a mullet. And then on the back side of that, it's going to help me out with a little bit of a kickback that I can use to continue creating content for you. I love doing this. And those of you that have used my code to make your Arken purchases, I appreciate the support. Maybe you're on the fence about an Arken product. Maybe you've watched this video and you want to try an EP8 for yourself. Use code MULLETS. It's going to mark it down to an extremely affordable price. The next way you can help grow this channel is liking this video, commenting down below. I love interacting with each of you that watch these videos. It's where a lot of my video ideas come from. And then finally, subscribing. That's going to make sure you're in line for my next video drop. It's going to signal to YouTube that you want to see more content from me. And it encourages me. I'm on a mission to get to 100,000 subscribers. If you're watching my videos and you're not subscribed, I'd like to ask you to do me a solid, hit that subscribe button, and put yourself in line to continue seeing new content from me. Those of you that are subscribed, I appreciate your continued support. So from there, thanks for watching. Hope you'll plan to join me in my next video.